Hello, everyone. My name is Bellamy, and I'm going to be talking about what roles do social attributes about family and violence play in the case of Gabriel Fernandez. A little bit about my process. I decided to find a topic in the field I wanted to study. The field I want to study is sociology and criminal justice. Currently, I am an intern for the Guardian ad litem, and in doing that work, I learned that I wanted to do more with children in the system and creating a better system. So I watched the documentary through a sociological lens and then studied the case on a macro and micro level. A little bit about the Gabriel Fernandez case. On May 13th, the Los Angeles Dispatch received a call from a man saying that there was an 8-year-old boy who had slipped into a bathtub and he wasn't breathing. And then the dispatch said that they instructed this man who called to do CPR on the boy until EMS arrived. Once EMS arrived, they found that the boy was in cardiac arrest and severely injured. The firefighters testified to seeing the traumas on the boy's body, such as BB gun marks, spoon burns, injuries to the neck, bite marks, swollen ankles, and even a skull fracture. They've successfully resuscitated him in the home, but he then later passed away due to loss of a lot of blood in the hospital. After hearing the case, I'd like to first start off by giving a little bit of family background knowledge on Gabriel and his family for you to have a better understanding of how he ended up the way that he did. Okay, so where it all started was with Gabriel being born to Pearl and Arnold, Pearl Fernandez and Arnold Contreras in 2005. Several days after his birth, he was given to his great uncle and his uncle's partner David. And then about 4 years after he turned 4, his grandfather took him because he didn't want his grandson being raised by two gay men. Here, I just wanted to show a quick timeline of how the chain of events happened. Again, he was born February 13th of 2005. He was given to his uncle, his great uncle, and his uncle's husband February 17th. By 2009, he was in the custody of his grandparents, and then Gabriel moved in with his mother and her boyfriend Asario in 2013, and then he passed away on May 13th of 2013. The issue I wanted to address was the attributes of the family and the mindsets and perspectives of the family. The family has traditionally been considered a private realm where public atrocities may go unchecked, and thus family violence is one of the most underreported crimes in the world. Um, this case I wanted to use as an example of that because throughout Gabriel's life, everyone knew that he was being abused, but there was no action steps or plans of actions being taken when he was with his mother. And that is what I want to focus on. Getting into the family attributes, a lot go undetected. So, child abuse is one form of violence that tends to go undetected until it's too late. The National Child Abuse and Neglect Data System says that in 2006, over 900,000 children fall victim to child abuse or neglect. Um, According to Bergerard, the Bureau of Justice Statistics reports that 9.2 million victims, about half of the population of New York, from 1998 to 2002 suffered injuries during an incident with a family member. And of all of those victims, only 16.5% of them receive medical care. And that's not even a quarter of that population that received any care. So it went unreported and untreated. Community violence is also an attribute to the issue of family violence. The term community violence refers to the extent that the community experienced structural inequities, impediments, and lack. Community violence is a term that I wanted to touch on. The term community violence refers to the extent that communities experience structural impediments and lack of resources because of the influence of policies and conditions which adversely affect them. So things like Medicare and socioeconomic status and race and gender, all of those things can be seen as family attributes along with community violence because those are issues that we see come up a lot that can have an effect on the treatment as a result of that violence, either by the family or the community. The most common psychological afflictions would be anxiety, depression, desensitized to violence, to violent acts, violent fantasies, helplessness, hopelessness, PTSD, emotional numbing, social withdrawal, disturbance, irritability, hypervigilance, guilt, and even suicide. One social attribute that I want to talk about is the concept of parenting in the LGBTQA plus community. Um, the LGBTQ community has experienced issues with parenting for decades, as we all know. Um, the LGBTQ people have not been able to parent without fear of legal or social consequences, and that was no different for David and Michael in pressuring to ensure that Gabriel was brought up in a heteronormative environment. The term heteronormative is ideological an ideology that assumes everyone is heterosexual and should express traditional gender conventionalities. So that means that in your normal life, men should do what men should do, and women should do what women should do, and there should be no cross in between. That's pretty much what heteronormative normativity means. Another challenge is that same-sex couples are limited in creating their own families because of the whole baby making process and maintaining custody of the children that they do have, because in some legal systems uh, they determine that same-sex parenting is acceptable and other ones don't believe so because of their conservative viewpoints. But research shows that psychologically there is an adjustment in those children who are in same-sex households. It's better on their self-esteem, academic performance, and other everyday issues that children deal with within the home. Because they are in a more diverse environment, they learn to see people in a different light and learn to be more acceptive to things that are different. Subculture parenting and family dynamics. The first thing I want to talk about is grandparents and grandparenting. More common now than before, there are a lot of children being raised by their grandparents. And in that household, there are two different types of grandparents. There's the self-effectuous grandparents, or those who feel that they can significantly influence the lives of their grandchildren. So those would be your grandparents who come around often, show up to your games, show up to your events, have holidays at their house, may go on a weekend with them, but they're not your actual parents and they don't technically raise you. And then you have the surrogate parent, which is the grandparent who gains control of the children when parents aren't present. So those would be your grandparents who you either live with or you spend 90% of your time with them. So they are not technically raising you, but socially they are. In the dynamic in the dynamic of the Gabriel Fernandez family, favoritism was a huge factor in Gabriel and his life. Favoritism is a common dynamic in a family that has multiple children. Favoritism happens when one child receives more treatment than the other siblings. Shirley McGuire would call this parental differential treatment in a level that a parent treats each child in the family. So if you have an oldest, a middle, and a youngest child, the oldest child will be treated differently than the youngest child, and the middle child either may get more or less attention than the other two siblings. There's also a thing called the family scapegoat, which is kind of the opposite of favoritism. It's when that one child is like the black sheep of the family. They get attention in a negative light because they can never do anything right in the eyes of the parent. And that was Gabriel in the case of living with Pearl. For Pearl, he was the family scapegoat. In looking at the Fernandez family, in order to fully understand how Gabriel's life ended up the way that it did, you have to look at it from a macro level and a micro level. On the macro level, you have to look at the family unit and the interactions among the generations. So you have to think about the idea that how Pearl was raised by her grandparents and their family dynamics and culture. In the Hispanic culture, what does it mean to be a grandparent? How do mothers treat their children? How do children act accordingly in the home? And things to that nature. And if Pearl grew up abused, how does that show up in Gabriel's life with her being his mother, including like his father and the fact that his father wasn't around and that the boyfriend did step in and take care of the family. And then on the micro level, you have to look at each family member separately and see how each individual and their flaws can contribute to the family. For example, the grandfather and his prejudice against same-sex couples could have contributed to the death of Gabriel, because if Gabriel remained in the home with his uncles, he would he could have lived in a thriving environment, but due to those prejudice against them, the grandfather pulled him out of the home. And then also with the grandfather being at the age that he wasn't necessarily able to take care of three kids in the way that they needed, and that's how he ended up back with his mother, which um, I took all of this to say that the social attributes about family and the family dynamic itself contributed to the ending of Gabriel's life. Um, when you look at race, when you look at socioeconomic status, when you look at prejudice against LGBTQ, when you look at the mother, the grandmother, the father, the grandfather, siblings, even, and even social workers, you can see how those individual sectors of his life were flawed. Even in the school system, they were flawed, and how if those areas in life were better or had different people with different mindsets over them, the ending of his life could have been completely different. And that's why I want to stay in this field and work in this field, because I feel that um, people from my generation and coming up can have fresher ideas and new perspectives to help change the lives of these children. I want to thank everyone for watching this. I enjoyed doing this project and working on this project with Dr. Brett Johnson. Here are my sources, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.